Hey guys, today I spoke with Jethro Sloan and we talked about his experience in working with a tech startup where every decision is very crucial, long term versus short term, and mindset and ownership is so key to the people that work there. I thought it was very interesting. Enjoy.
Beyond Coding. Welcome to Beyond Coding, a dive into the world of successful people in IT. From your sponsors, Zebia, creating digital leaders. Here's your host, Patrick Akil.
Hey man.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Cool. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So yesterday, actually, you and me were already chatting and you told me you worked for a tech startup before. It's something that I think I'd like, but I never know when to do it. How did you get by that tech startup? Like, did it come upon your path or did you actively pursue it?
Yeah, so I think for a while in my career, I've been kind of looking for something where I could put my own stamp on a product or on a on a solution.
Yeah.
And I think a startup really offers that to you. So I think when I had options to move abroad, because the startup I joined directly from South Africa.
Okay.
So I had a couple options of different companies to join in different places, and yeah, the one in Amsterdam with the startup, it just seemed like the most natural progression for me in my career. So yeah, I went for it.
Yeah, and that's then also when you took the leap from South Africa to Amsterdam.
Yes, correct. I was lucky enough that the startup was able to sponsor me and also help me out with the moving budget. So that really helped.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Actually, I wouldn't expect a startup to do that because they're kind of tighter on budget, I would assume. I mean, I've never worked for one, but I guess budget is usually tight.
Yeah, I think working for a startup, the budget is always on your mind. You know, like you're always on the edge of what can happen. You're always thinking about the investor and where the money's going. I think compared to working for a big corporate, you never really worry about the baseline and how much money you're spending on anything, on even Azure or any of the cloud providers.
Exactly.
You don't really think about that. And you don't really think about any actions that you make could negatively affect the growth of the company, right?
Yeah.
In a big corporate, you're kind of just building a solution for what they need and there's no real worries. Whereas in a startup, it's always on your mind and it's motivating, but it can also be demotivating at the same time. It just depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, you probably need to be very practical in the decisions you make, and I guess weigh the pros and cons for short term versus long term. But to step back a bit, were you one of the first guys then on the team as well?
Yeah, so they assembled the team. I think there was one or two guys that joined before me a couple months prior, but yeah, they pretty much assembled the team within about 6 months.
Yeah.
Mainly Brazilian guys.
Okay.
One of the CEOs was a Portuguese guy, and there was some Brazilians and me, the lone South African.
Yeah, that's really cool. Did they all fly over to Amsterdam as well, or did some people work remote already?
So yeah, they started working remote from Brazil, and then they flew them over for like a test run. And then once they saw everything was good and the team would work well, they flew those guys over, and then I joined about 2 months or a month after that.
Yeah. How was the initial like working together with the team? What did you see, for example? I always notice that when I join something, I'm a bit more reserved, and I keep my opinion a bit more to myself initially. And I like to see how things are before I kind of mess with it.
Yeah.
Are you the same?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you start at a company, you kind of have a little bit of, you're kind of shy in your ideas and you're just kind of taking a step back to see how everything works. But I'm the same on that respect. And I think the guys, when I first looked at it, they were also very pragmatic and really good developers, most of them, to be honest. It was a really, really high-powered team. It was refreshing to see. Sometimes you join a team in a big corporate and there's maybe some people that you're kind of carrying along or aren't always pulling their weight. I think in a startup, that's not really something that can happen. If someone's not really contributing, then it makes it very difficult to succeed. So everyone was really focused and really on succeeding.
Yeah, I think it definitely will stand out more because you're in a startup. I think you contribute more on a lot of like, if you have a horizontal axis, you contribute more on that axis, I think, rather than vertically. And if someone doesn't contribute as much, I think it's more apparent than what you would have otherwise in a bigger company.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's important, I think, in the startup world is ownership, right? Yeah. You have the chance to create something new, and it's up to you on how you decide you want to take that. We had a guy who joined us who we thought would be the head of QA for us. We needed a QA tester, but we also wanted someone to set up the automation. And he was kind of coming in and doing the very big organization way of just, okay, I need to test this, so I'm going to test it, and that's the end of that. Where actually we were looking for more someone to create us the QA strategy for the long run.
Yeah.
But you can't really tell someone to do that or how to do that, because you need to pick up the domain and run with it. That's the way it works in a startup. So it didn't really work out for him, but that's just a different mentality that you need to have going into a startup.
Yeah. I really like the way you laid it up, because it does boil down to ownership, right? You own something, you can create a vision for yourself and for the team on how and where you want things to go. But then when you are in a small team like that, does someone take usually the lead role, or is it more distributed and everyone can contribute? What was your experience like?
Yeah, I would say there was maybe a bit of a power struggle at one point. But once we kind of got over the initial speed bump of that, everyone kind of just fell into a natural progression, and everyone kind of became the master of their own domain. So there was no real clean cut leader, I would say. I was kind of the thought leader behind the platform and the architecture that we had for the back end. So awesome. I kind of just took, I kind of took ownership of that, and people came to me with questions. But we also had guys who did the DevOps side, and one of the guys became like the master of the DevOps, and any questions you had would go straight to him. That's one thing that I do like about a startup is, in a big organization, sometimes you have to bounce emails around 5 or 6 times to find out what you're actually looking for.
Yeah.
Whereas with a startup, this guy's the DevOps guy. You just ask him the question directly on Slack. You don't even need an email, and he'll give you the answer right away. So I really like that. You get really fast communication between people, and I think big organizations could adopt this a little bit more. I think breaking it up into smaller teams, like kind of like startup teams inside of a big organization, might work really well, because you get high performance out of those teams, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult for bigger organizations to isolate teams in such a way that they can be high performant by themselves, because everything is kind of intertwined already in an organization, that it might be a bit hard to basically filter out a domain and be like, all right, this is your domain, basically.
Yeah, no, sure. I understand that. I think also there's a bit of bureaucracy that goes into big organizations as well.
But that does explain, like the way you laid it out, why startups initially has such a huge velocity compared to bigger organizations, because they don't have that bureaucracy. They have shorter lines of communication, and they have more people that are willing to take ownership to progress things. It's such a nice culture, I think. But then you mentioned initially you were responsible for the platform and kind of the architecture. How do you make, how should I say this? Because you need to make decisions which are practical, but also need to be stable for the long term, right? They need to be robust. How do you make those decisions then usually?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult kind of seesaw to weigh out and balance. I think that on the one side, being a purist in a development sense, you want to make a solution, especially in a platform, a solution that works for everything, and it's super generic, and it solves all the problems, and it solves, you don't shoot yourself in the foot in the long run.
Yeah.
But also you have tight deadlines because you have clients and customer needs that you need to meet as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I think that's really difficult, to balance. I think the way you go about it is, you have to be really pragmatic in your decisions. You have to say, okay, this is what we need to achieve in the long run, and this is what the client needs. And you kind of need to say, okay, what solution can we do now that we can evolve later? All the decisions you need to do need to be able to evolve into the final solution. So you need to look at both sides. You say, okay, the short-term solution would be, okay, we give this client something quick and dirty, I guess. And the long run is, okay, we need to build something that's pure and perfectly tested, and everything's working 100% along the platform lines. You kind of need to find the middle ground between those and say, okay, let's break it up. So this is what the client needs. That's, say, step 1, right? Then step 2 would be, okay, we need to evolve it further and further and further. So you kind of need to lay out a journey or a roadmap for how you're going to evolve each solution in the long run.
Yeah.
So you kind of start with, okay, this is the client's one, and if they need it tomorrow, you go with the easiest and quickest way you can do it, because that's just what you need to do. You need to meet the demand. But if you can have a little bit more time, you kind of, okay, we can get to step 1, and you get to step 1, you say, okay, cool, we still have a little bit of time. Let's maybe get to step 2 and step 3, and then you see how far you go until the deadline. But you always make sure that you're meeting the needs from day 1, and then you can evolve the solution in the long run, because you always get time, I would say, in between client demands or whatever your market demands are. You get some time in between, and then you can, I wouldn't say refactor, I would say progress the solutions that you have to make them into the perfect solution that you envision for the platform.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you can't really go from step 1 to step 8 just because you want to get to step 8. You need to go through all the other steps first. And it makes a lot of sense that you do that in kind of a progressive way. But still, that first step should be very important, because you don't want to, you need to meet the non-functional requirements as well as have that long-term vision of where you want to go. Was that something you already had when you joined, and therefore you were like, all right, I really want to put my stamp onto something?
Yeah,
I think something you kind of formed along the way.
Yeah, I think my experience over the years, and I think any developer, I think, has experiences with legacy platforms that have some really bad downsides. Like sometimes there'll be no logging at all. You need to use one of the companies that use what's called Purview, which allows you to dig into like the underlying C# errors, because there wasn't really built-in logging into the system.
Yeah.
And for me, that always felt really cumbersome, and I think it's better to build the logging in from day one, right?
Yeah.
So I think that in those kind of situations, I took that idea that, okay, all these problems that I had over the years that I thought in my mind, okay, this could be better, this could be better, this could be better, this could be better. I decided that, okay, now that I have the chance to put my stamp on a platform and make them, I'm going to make sure that we don't close any of those doors that have been closed before, and that made my life really difficult as a developer. So I guess I used my experience and kind of channeled it all into the one platform solution.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you want your development experience to be as smooth and as seamless as possible, so you can focus on the things that actually matter, which is delivering value for the business, especially when you're in a startup sense. Like every single piece of value has bigger impact than it would have otherwise in a bigger company, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. One of the dangers, I think, is over-engineering, right? As a developer, you always want to make the best solution, and sometimes your mind goes into a really far place that's over-engineered. And sometimes you need to take a step back and be like, all right, this is too far. You need to leave some license. You can't, you have to think about, okay, if a new developer joins, how do they tackle adding value to the business right away?
Yeah.
Do you want to make it so they have to follow specific guidelines? Because developers kind of have their own style to doing things. And do you really want to step on someone's style? Their style might be different to yours, and it might be a really good style. But if it does, the platform shouldn't really tell the developer what kind of style they can code in. I think that's a little bit too far, in my opinion. And I think the better way to go is to, leave it open that they can follow guidelines to solve the problems, and you give them the tools to solve the problems. But the way that they decide to design the flow is totally up to them. And I think that gives the flexibility, but also the freedom for each developer to express themselves inside the platform.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that, because your platform should be a tool. It should not be kind of a way that defines how you write code, or kind of takes away your creative expression, because I think writing code is kind of a form of expressing yourself, kind of. But a thing you mentioned really hits home with me when I hear some people say, well, we might reuse this in the future. And I'm like, well, we don't really have a use case. It might not really add value. So why take these extra steps, which is going to take a lot of time currently, for a potential in the future, which usually never ends up actually happening. Sure, on the off chance it does happen, it's nice that we've already done that. But initially, it adds a lot of complexity while it's not really needed. Did you also weigh those pros and cons then initially like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what I mentioned earlier about the steps. You want to allow the opportunity to make it generic for the future. So you don't want to close the door and be like, okay, this solution, we're just going to use it now and we maybe throw it away later, or because maybe it can't be extended. So what you do is you leave it open and you create it in a way that, okay, if I need to extend it, I can, or if I need to make it generic, I can. So you just make sure you don't close that door, and then you solve the problem at the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I kind of brushed over it, but what were you guys doing at the startup?
Yeah, so we had a platform that we created, using Node.js and TypeScript in the backend, and graph database, MongoDB, blockchain, quite on the edge of technology right now, emerging technologies. We basically could make the platform do whatever we needed to do. We started off with some I'm just trying to think of the name. What are they called? Like lists and media, like presentations, kind of, how do I explain this? They are, I forgot the name of the word, but it basically, tools that you can use to help increase your productivity tools. So that's the name. Yeah. So we were basically creating all different types of productivity tools. We had a ledger for financial, like track on the blockchain. The platform can be configured to do pretty much anything at the time.
Yeah.
I would say one of the main features that we had that I really enjoyed writing was the ability to basically permission data at the lowest level. So each level of data you could give someone permission to or remove. So that was really powerful in a really simple, quite easy way to configure. I think AWS has IAM, which is, I would say, quite verbose in the way you need to specify. This gave a little bit of an easier way that business could even permission who has access to what. So I think that was really powerful
Nice.
for us. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Then what I always wonder is, let's say you're really early in kind of your development phase. How do you get the feedback from the right users as fast as possible? Because I think when you get that, the faster the better, right? They can say, well, this doesn't really make sense, or this does make sense, and also gives you energy if you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is, you already touched on it. You need to get feedback as fast as possible. I think a lot of companies or startups go down the route of, okay, we'll develop something and then we'll try sell it to the market. I think you need to work hand in hand with your market and your clients to deliver what they're actually looking for. So yeah, that feedback loop is exceptionally important. I think, in Agile, you have the testing phase and you keep going back to the testing phase over and over again, and you can throw in the client's feedback into that, and you keep looping over and over in that and make sure that you're following what they need and not just developing, okay, this is what I think they need. That's the biggest mistake I think a lot of startups make, is they develop something that they think people need instead of actually developing something that people really need.
Exactly. You build it and they'll come.
Yeah.
That train of thought, I don't think it usually works out.
Yeah.
It's probably a unicorn that it does work out. But most of the time, I really value getting the feedback. So I'm assuming that's what you guys did as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also from the dev team, you got that feedback directly? Or was it kind of funneled down in the small hierarchy that you have in a startup?
Well, yeah, we had a flat organization, so there wasn't really a hierarchy, I would say. But yeah, the dev team, and we were all sitting in the same room and we were all working on it at the same time. So I was kind of in charge of the platform, and then the other guys were implementing the use cases that we had for whatever we needed to do. So they would be right next to me if they had any questions or any feedback. Yeah, it would be instant. Like if they needed something, I would, we had like a little bit of a backlog going there. And if they had, we had a backlog. But if they had any required features at the time, I would weigh it up and say, okay, we can do this now. Does it bring value right now? And if it did, then we'd implement the platform change and go from there. So yeah, once again, very pragmatic about our approach to how we tackled the problems that we had.
Yeah, really cool. What you mentioned is you came very specifically with a goal. You said, I want to put my stamp onto something. It's either going to be a platform or a piece of software, but something from the start initially. Are you happy with how things went, or do you have something in mind that you'd rather have changed at the time?
Yeah, no, I think actually I was really happy with, I think it's the most, out of all the work that I've done in my life, it was definitely the proudest moment of mine to be able to put my stamp on a platform that could pretty much evolve and be anything it needed to be.
Yeah.
We started out making a platform that was meant to be generic, and that's what we achieved. The platform could be built and configured and really easily and really fast to serve many needs. So I think that I was exceptionally happy with the result. And would I change anything? I think you can always look back and say that you would change. I think the feedback loop, we could have targeted more the requirements faster, I think. But I think,
that's always hard to say in hindsight, right?
Yeah, exactly. Hindsight's a great thing. And you look back and you be like, yeah, we could have made this faster, or maybe this decision was wrong. But I think the decisions were right, maybe just in the wrong order.
Yeah.
So I don't regret any of the decisions we made. I just think maybe we could have prioritized a little bit better, but it can't be perfect, and you will make mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something you'll take with you to the future then as well. It's also just another experience at the end of the day, which is really nice to have. Then I'm wondering though, why did you exit that startup phase? Was it at some point like, okay, I've done what I wanted to do. Now it's more continuously and I can't make the initial impact that I was seeking? Or how'd you guys end up ending it off?
Yeah, I think for me, once the platform was built, I survive on solutions. So my role actually evolved from just being a developer to being the solutions architect for the company. And I think once the solutions and the platform kind of was at a state where it was really good and it was more like a maintenance phase and they were building onto that, there wasn't much need to solve any problems anymore.
Yeah.
So I just found that to me, to carry on growing and to challenge myself, I needed to find more problems to solve. I think problem solving is something that's I've always had a real passion for, and I think using solutions to solve problems for organizations is what I'll always want to do.
Yeah.
So I think I just moved to find something new and to try something new.
Yeah.
You got to push yourself. I think moving to Sebia, I had to push myself a little bit out of my comfort zone. And that's where growth is, right? All the growth is outside of your comfort zone. So that was my thoughts.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I always hear developers kind of exiting that phase when it goes initially away from that initial product development phase where any change has high impact and is high value, and it grows more continuous. I think people think it's kind of the holy grail. If you start greenfield, you can put your stamp on it, a lot of value really fast. And when it kind of slows off, they're like, okay, that kind of means my exit as well. What do you think that is? Like, people really want to thrive on that initial phase rather than continuously develop and kind of improve, because it doesn't end there for a product lifecycle, right? Once you are actually live in the market, you can still add a lot of value.
Yeah, I think it's the initial excitement that comes along with building something new, especially in a greenfield. There's no legacy that you need to deal with, right? You can take everything from scratch and build it up the way you want to. And I think once you've kind of built it up and you've seen what you've created, some people like to see it through. And I think some people just say, okay, I've been part of the creation phase.
Yeah.
And I think that's what interests me. I think a lot of people are interested in more the creation phase than the longevity of the longevity, obviously, in terms of the solution. But I think their commitment to the project in terms of longevity, maybe they're like, I've created what I thought I set out to create, and now it's time for me to maybe go create something else. So I think that's, for me, that's definitely a driving factor. Once I'd created something, I was happy to see it through, but I also felt that pushing myself was the right way to go.
Yeah. Do you think, because I always wonder why we build a lot of stuff, right? We build a piece of software and at some point it becomes legacy, or someone calls it legacy. There's not really a definition for it. It's just old and it's complex. It has a lot of technical debt, and then we rebuild it again. Do you think it's because the initial people that build it kind of leave and knowledge gets kind of flattened out that way? Because other people come on the project, they see what's there, but they also put their own stamp on it, and it's stamp after stamp after stamp. And probably the initial thought is different in the beginning than how it is at the end. I always wonder how that goes.
Yeah, I think it's definitely where does legacy start and where does greenfield start and where does legacy stop? I think that's a very valid point. Yeah, I think in terms of people coming onto the project, for me, I think it's also, knowledge sharing. I think one of the biggest problems is there's no knowledge transfer when someone leaves, and then that gets lost. And what ends up happening is people kind of hack the platform or hack the solution that was made before, and hack kind of leads to this giant monster that we call legacy.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely one of the biggest problems. And I think it's also from a business side, business is not always interested in investing in the platform, right? They're like, we have money, we have clients to serve. We can either spend some of that money on the clients and make more money, or we can spend some of that money and invest on the platform a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe also a problem, that the investment cycles going into the platforms or whatever solution you have is not always in the right direction. You know, sometimes it's only business centric, and then it's not really building the solution for the long term. Because as I mentioned, you have a lot of solutions that you've built and they're all at, say, point C in the alphabet, and they need to get to Z. If business stops at C and continues with doing new features for clients and doesn't invest to take it to the next level, then you also create that really big technical debt. You don't update the packages you're using, you don't update the databases that you're using, and that's serious consequences in the long run. And that ends up leaving a legacy monster, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that you distinguish platform versus kind of feature development, let's say. Because you have an initial platform, right? You build it. It should meet the non-functional requirements. And then you have continuously features that you add that add value to the customer. But at some point, you're a lot of years down the line, and your platform that you've built initially might need some love in terms of development. But what you're saying totally hits home when a company just says, well, we want to deliver feature after feature after feature, because that's where the initial value comes from. And then at some point, I think the technical debt that you build up in your platform might just be very complicated to then rewrite or fix, rather than building it from scratch again and going into the same life cycle again.
Yeah, I think that's before I moved to the Netherlands, I worked for a company where they were still using software from the 90s.
Yeah.
And they'd actually written a whole bunch of custom SQL stored procedures to operate on the data that was created by the software that they were using.
Yeah.
So they couldn't actually update anymore to the latest version. It was a huge undertaking. And the longer you leave it, the more it builds, right? It's like taking the trash out. If you don't take the trash out every single day or whenever you need to take it out, it's eventually going to build up, and then it's going to take you 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It's going to take you forever, and eventually you end up with a dump.
Yeah.
And no one wants to move it, and no one has the time to move it. So I think that's kind of you need to do the garbage collection for your software as well. Not even I think that's what people neglect a lot, and you need to invest in that. You can't not invest in the longevity of the software.
Yeah. I really like that analogy of the garbage piling up.
Yeah.
I love that image. Yeah. What I was also wondering is, or I usually wonder this, is when do you choose to kind of build it yourself versus taking it off the shelf, right? We have existing solutions for a lot of things, existing solutions that solve a lot of problems. But still we build a lot of stuff ourselves, I think. How was that for you? Did you make a lot of decisions? I mean, it's different for a platform, I guess, but it still is there. How did you experience that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times you start off using a package or a module from some other third party that's really readily available and easy to use. But I think with all solutions, the thing you need to realize is there's no perfect solution, and every single solution comes with a downside. So if you're taking on board a software that's external or a package that's external, you need to understand the downsides that you're bringing along with that. Even if you write it yourself, there's downsides too. So you need to weigh up: do the positives outweigh the negatives of this? Will this solve the solution for now? Can we replace it later, or are we tied or married to the solution in the long run? So you need to weigh up that versus what your expectations are for the product's life cycle. Like a platform or a product, it kind of becomes a living organism, and you need to manage all the little different appendages that it has. And if you're using a third party appendage, you don't really have access to be able to change that. You can ask for help, or you can ask them queries or create a pull request to their code. But also sometimes it's quite difficult. So you're also relying on someone else to deliver, and that can be costly. So you need to take into account all of those different parameters when you're deciding on what solution is the right solution.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? You get it, you hack away at what you needed to hack away at, but at some point it's going to hit back at you either in maintenance, or you can't use it in the same way, so you need something else.
Yeah.
So you need to go back and kind of reuse something else.
Yeah.
But I think initially it will get you a lot of speed, but what you're saying, the long-term kind of pros and cons are important, I guess. It's just hard to be objective, I think, when you're in the moment, when you just need a solution and the solution is there.
Yeah.
So you use it, but obviously on long term, it might hit you back in a weird way.
Yeah. I think one of my strengths is being able to see not see the future, but to think about the future and have a vision for what will happen if we do implement this down the line. I don't even think about myself coding. I think about new people joining. How will they use it? I think about how it will affect the product. So you need to think about all of the different facets of the solution you're taking on board. It's not just the software. It's everything. Is it going to cost money? It's pricing. It's developers coming on. Is it easy to use? Is there good documentation? There's a lot of different factors that you need to factor in making that decision. And sometimes you end up sitting there thinking for sometimes I would be, if I'm honest, a lot of the time when I was working on the platform, I would spend 2 or 3 or 4 days, sometimes even a week, not writing a single line of code, just thinking about all the different possibilities. And then when I'm finally committed in my mind, I would write the code out quickly and we'd go from there. So a lot of the time it actually wasn't even coding. It was just thinking.
Yeah. Is that who you are as a person? Or do you think it's a skill that you've acquired and kind of honed and are using it in this way?
I don't know. I think I have this kind of background processor that I can run inside my mind where I can have the solution and I let it sit with me. And then I'll be in the shower or I'll be doing something random. I'll be working out or whatever the case. And something will just pop into my mind and be like, hey, this is not going to work because have you thought about this? So I kind of like raise red flags in my own mind about what potential problems there could be. And then I let it sit with me for, like I said, a week or so. And then at the end of the week, I would have either raised a lot of red flags and I would have been like, no, we can solve it with this. Or I would have been like, no, this is not the way to go because down the line, it's going to affect us. So I think for me, it feels like it's a skill that I have. I'm not sure if everyone else has this, but for me, I definitely feel like it's a skill and I've used it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I recognize that I have that in the shower a lot, weirdly enough. But I like the thing that you said, I haven't written a single line of code, but I've just been pondering about things and decisions that I need to make. I think sometimes we take a lot of time to decide, but I don't know if that's a bad thing, right? If we need a new feature or it's a change on the platform, we can take as much time as we need, or we can time box it and be like, okay, we need to force a decision by that. What's your take on that? You like time boxing it for yourself? I think you like taking the time.
Yeah, I think working on the platform, I prefer taking my time.
Yeah.
When you're working on customer requirements, sometimes the time frame is set by the requirements, so you don't really have a choice on how long you can think about it. But when it comes to major decisions that could affect going from, say, version 1 of the platform to version 2, that process should not be rushed. And I don't think that. I think business obviously has a say in the situation, but I think that you should kind of trust the IT and the IT department and the different intellectuals you have working on the solutions to take their time and actually come up with the right solutions.
I like that. I like the answer. It depends, right? Because obviously some decisions can be a bit shorter. We can take as much time as we need, but it might not be as practical. But the decisions that do need to take a lot of time, we should take a lot of time for that and make the right one.
Yeah, and I think that comes with communication, right? We spoke earlier about the shorter lines of communication. When you have a bureaucracy in a bigger company where you have to have like multiple lines and you have a product owner and you have business that's talking to the product owner and you kind of have a bit of a broken telephone that's going on.
Yeah.
When we had business talking directly to, when I was talking directly to business, I could let them know, hey, this decision is going to take us some time because we need to take the time to make this decision. They were kind of really understanding on that, and I really appreciated that. So I think that trust needs to come on both sides. You know, that there needs to be a real trust between business and the IT department to deliver the solutions. And that's sometimes maybe what goes missing, I think, is that people don't always trust each other to deliver the solutions. So you need to place trust in the right place and have faith that the solutions that come out will be right.
Yeah. I think trust is a very interesting thing to me, because I think always initially when you join in, you'll have it, or you should have it. Let me rephrase that. But somehow, some way, trust gets lost or gets cloudy, or people have bad experience trusting X versus Y, and people have a distrust. And once there's distrust, things in communication and getting things done get very cloudy and get very hard to do, weirdly enough, because it's so basic, right? You come on the team, we already hired you, like you went through the whole process, so you should have full trust, right? But somehow, sometimes initially, it's not like that. You need to prove yourself again and again and again, and build up trust rather than having it initially.
Yeah, I think it's always an upward battle to prove trust, right? It always feels like it's a carrot on a stick and you're chasing to be trusted.
Exactly.
But there needs to kind of be like a baseline layer where you say, okay, we've achieved these goals. You know, you can trust the team now. You don't need to keep validating, what they're doing is what they're doing correct. You know, so I think that's something that we used effectively in the startup. Was business had a real trust. We had we had weekly meetings with business, not even on a technical level, just on a personal level, and we would just discuss how I'm feeling, how they're feeling, and we kind of just created this open lines of communication that gave a huge amount of trust between us.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I love that. How was the working together with the tech team then? Let's say just that team initially. Did you have anything specifically that you did?
So, yeah, when I came onto the project, the guys already started on like the initial idea of the platform, but they were kind of seeing it more as just it wasn't really a platform. It was more just like a software that they were using to solve the different problems that we had.
Yeah.
But when I joined, I was definitely starting to try and give some direction and input on where I think we should go. I'm quite an outspoken guy. Yeah, in the beginning, we mentioned that you are a little bit shy, but once you feel comfortable in the situation, I definitely feel like I want to express my feelings about a situation, even if I'm wrong. I'm totally okay being wrong, and I think that's important. It's never a bad thing to say what you're feeling, but also you must remember that you can be wrong, and if you're wrong, you should admit it and be like, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that gives validation, right? If you have a point that you're making, and I have an objection, and we go through it together, and we see, okay, hold on, I was actually wrong in my objection, then that's further proof that what you're saying is correct. So I don't think there's ever a bad way of discussing it. Even if one person has an opposite view, you go through it together and you realize, hold on, what you're saying actually is wrong, but it validates what I'm talking about. So we've actually won in the conversation because we've just validated that the solution is correct. Yeah. So I think that's important.
I completely agree. I always say I'm stubborn, but I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. And sometimes I'll say, well, you've convinced me, so that people will know that, okay, I've changed my initial train of thought. And I now agree with you, so we can move forward, right? There's no need to endlessly discuss and be like, well, I'm taking this standpoint now just out of principle, because that's not progressive at all. So I really love that you said just discuss it and admit when you're wrong. And there might not be a wrong. Sometimes you can find middle ground.
Yeah.
But as long as you move forward, that's already very effective, right?
Yeah, exactly. Is someone is if everyone in the conversation has some input, you're kind of going on the journey together. It's not, I think that was important for us, was not one person standing up there and being a dictator and saying, this is what we need to do and this is how we're going to do it. No, it's not like that, right? It's like, okay, guys, we have a smart group of people in the room. Let's think about what would be the best solution. I propose this idea. And then people can say, hey, no, that we think it should be like this. And then we can go through, okay, why do you think it should be like this? And then, yeah, as you say, you can convince people, or you yourself can be convinced. You were the one that had their initial idea. You can be like, no, what? Actually, I think your guys' way of approaching the solution, even though it's similar to my idea, is definitely the better way to go. And you move from there, and you keep going over and over all these hurdles that you meet, and eventually you end up in a place where everyone's happy, which is great, right? When you're a programmer and you're working on a project, there's a lot of times when you can be like, no, I don't really like the direction we're going, or I don't agree with this. But actually, if everyone was in the room and everyone had the journey together, then most likely everyone will be happy with where the journey progressed.
Yeah, you're on the same page.
Yeah.
So then you can move forward, for sure. I wonder, like, were there specific things in the way of working that you guys did that you tried out? Like, did you guys pair program, or where was everyone isolated? You said already some people started out remote and then everyone flew out to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
What did you guys try out?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we used super effectively was pair programming.
Really?
I'm a huge advocate for pair programming. I think it has multiple different applications. It can be learning. It can be, as we said, developing the solution that you have. Actually, just yesterday at my current client, one of the guys just joined, and he was going through some tutorials, but I think he wanted some more hands-on experience.
Yeah.
So I just let him shadow me while I was working. I was working on the solution and I was working on the platform, and all I was doing was just explaining everything as I was going through it. So for me, it was not really reducing my productivity. I was just talking while I was working.
Yeah.
And I think you can get a lot of value from that. So I
personally love it, right? Because I think the more you explain what you're doing, the better you get at actually like figuring out things in your mind already, right? The way you need to fix your train of thought and explain it to someone for them to understand it, even if they're a novice or an expert. It's a skill that you need to hone.
Yeah.
But on paper, it's still two people working on the same problem, right? That's why I think sometimes it's frowned upon. But I really love it. So you guys did that a lot then in the startup as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think all the times when I had any doubts about what I was doing, I would call in one of the other guys and be like, hey, let's just work on this together. And if I had two solutions, because often you get to a crossroads and you're like, I can go in this direction or I can go in this direction.
Yeah.
And sometimes just telling another person the two options, it already in your mind, you're like, I should go with this option just by saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Thinking it is one thing, but saying it out loud, sometimes, or for me especially, it just gives me the path that I want to go. When I hear it from my own mouth, it just feels like, okay, this is the way we should go.
Yeah, I have no clue why that is, but I completely get what you're saying. When I'm explaining it, I'm like, well, now this completely makes sense versus the other one, which doesn't really make sense. And the person across from me hasn't even said one thing. So it's just me saying out loud what I'm thinking, and that already helps, right? Yeah. And I'm just like, well, I think we both know which one we're going for, so thank you. And
And a lot of times they're like, well, I didn't do anything. Well, yeah, but they actually did, right? Just listening to you was all they needed to do, and that helped. So I think, using that, we were able to come up with really great solutions in really quick time, instead of sitting there thinking to myself for the solution for days. If I just said it out loud, we came to the solution and we could progress.
Yeah.
So I think the velocity we gained was actually more than two people working.
And that's. I also think that's the value you add while you're pair programming, right? It's not just 1+1, and you're two people, so you have like half the speed. No, because I don't know if it's additive or multiplicative, but it's definitely something that's way better than two people working on the same problem, right? That's way too black and white.
Yeah, exactly. I think we had an analogy at the startup where, multiple people don't have a baby faster than one person, right?
Yeah.
If you're making a baby, it still takes one person has to carry that baby for the duration of the pregnancy. And I think for solutions, it can be the same, right? So it doesn't matter if you have 5 or 6 people working on the same solution, it's still going to take the same amount of time. So instead of working on different parts and trying to merge them together, which happens a lot, right? Everyone gets kind of pigeonholed into the different parts of the solution.
Yeah.
And then they try and merge it together and actually feel like there's problems. Whereas if you tried to work on it together as a team, and pair program, or even mob program, which I've done before as well, which is really great. Mob program a problem, then again, everyone's going on the journey, everyone is part of the solution. And now when someone goes back and has to work on their own part, they already know the direction the solution is going, so they can add on to that. Yep. So I think that's, again, hugely powerful, and should be used more for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because let's say I'm working on A and the solution requires A and B, and you're working on B, we still need to communicate on where to align. Whereas if we're doing it together, that already goes like, by the way we're communicating and working together, that is already inherent, I think. One of the things you mentioned is mob programming. I've never had any experience with that. Can you first lay out what it is? And I'm definitely keen to know what your experience is.
Yeah, sure. Mob programming is kind of what it sounds like. It's the same as pair programming, except it's not just two. It's multiple people in a room. Generally, it's nice to have a projector or a big screen where everyone can sort of look at the code and look at the solution. And then, you can take turns in being the driver, or one person can be the driver. And it just gives. What I also like about it is you can utilize. So, when you're thinking about a problem, sometimes you need to Google some stuff. Yep. But if you're mob programming, you can have like 2 or 3 other people Googling at the same time while you're thinking. So you get velocity on that part as well. And you have different ideas being inputted into the solution. So again, I think it's the same as pair programming. It just gets amplified when you need more stakeholders in the solution design.
That's really cool. And you mentioned you put kind of use one screen then as well.
Yep.
And just everyone has their own tools if they need to Google something.
Yeah.
That sounds really cool. Did you guys actively like choose to do that? Were you guys like, okay, for this problem, let's mob program on this one because it is that complex? So I want a lot of people in to weigh with the decisions we need to make. Was that something active or was it something passive?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, when the guys were implementing the solutions on top of the platform had some ideas around what we needed to do, or they had some problems with the platform that they were experiencing, get in a room together and go through it together. We did this quite often. It can also be used as a knowledge sharing session, right? Yeah. So I can show, hey, we've got this new feature. Instead of having, maybe you don't always have time to write the documentation as soon as the feature's done because the client needs it. So instead of taking the time to write the documentation, which then they need to read, you have a knowledge sharing session, you show them how it works, and they can actively work on it with you together. And maybe they can even give you, say, hey, how about we improve this, or how about we improve that? So you get that feedback loop really fast.
Yeah.
And then afterwards you can write the documentation, because you don't, it's better to get I always feel hands-on experience is better than reading some docs personally. That's my feeling. I know other people have different opinions about this, but I think that in our instance, having hands-on experience meant that the guys could go start implementing, and I could work on, maybe fixing, maybe adding more unit tests, or maybe adding the documentation that we needed. Yeah.
I really like what you said in that you just wanted feedback, right? It's still feedback. And in, let's say, product development, you want feedback from your client. But if you're in a technical team, it's so important to also get feedback from your teammates. Let's just call them teammates.
Yeah.
But I really love that you said also fail fast, get fast feedback. All that stuff still applies, right? If I'm writing something, I can write it in 5 different ways. And if I choose A or B, it doesn't really matter. As long as I get someone else's opinion to just weigh in and be like, okay, this is fine, right? Because you still need that shared understanding of how it should look. You have an idea about quality and where you want to go, and the things that you want to keep in place like that. Really like hearing that. Feedback as fast as possible still applies.
Yeah, exactly. And also, what I also realized in creating a platform is anything that can be abused on the system with code will be abused, right? That's if you think, oh, no one's going to use it like this, someone's definitely going to use it like that. So it's good to have that session where someone's like, hey, can we use it in this way? Yeah. And you're like, hold on, no, it shouldn't be used in this way. So then you can correct the flow of the way it needs to work, just so that you avoid it being hacked into a way that it's not designed to be used.
Yeah, because if people keep using it in that way it's not meant to be used, what happens then, do you think?
Well, then you start creating the technical debt that we spoke about, right? Because now people have created the solution, and now we say we need to make a change to the flow that the solution needed. Now we can all of a sudden go and validate all of these hacks that we had that are now we have production code that's hacked on top of the solution that we had.
Yeah.
And now it's debt. It's instant. It's not even debt that accrues over time. It's almost instant debt that you've created. So you need to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. And building on top of that debt is very costly then, right? Because reverting it means reverting the hack plus all the things that are built on top of that.
Exactly. And then it's building blocks, right? So it's the solution and the hacks, then the hacks on top of the hacks, and eventually it just becomes, Jenga. I think Jenga is a good way of explaining it, right? If you pull out the bottom brick, it's definitely going to fall, and that's exactly what happens.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Man, technical debt is a complex thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think legacy as well. I really don't know how like when it starts and when it ends, but I think it's just a feeling that people have, or a team has. At some point, you rather not spend time building on top of what you already have, and just be like, well, we can do this way faster if we just rebuild this part and move this out, move this place of a garbage dump out. And just start from a fresh room, I guess.
Yeah, again, it's the pragmatic approach. I think that's the most important aspect to look at when you're deciding on any solutions, or how you decide you wanna build it, right? You need to say, okay, the solution worked for a while, but hey, it was wrong and it's not going to work going forward. Then you need to call in the trash collection company, and you need to throw away that whole piece, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
It make mistakes happen. You can't expect to make the perfect solution. Well, there actually isn't no perfect solution, but you can't expect to make the best fit solution all the time. You will make mistakes. We're human. No one thinks about all the situations. Even if you try, you won't think about all the situations. So you need to just say, okay, well, this didn't work out for us. It's okay. We throw it away, we rebuild, and we learn some lessons. That's the important part, is the learnings you get.
Yeah.
You can't just throw it away and not gather the information that you did, because then you're wasting the resource that was the information you could have learned.
Yeah, I completely agree. Mistakes are fine, right? Everyone makes mistakes. Learning them is how they become important in how you progress and how you grow. Completely makes sense. One of the final things I still wanted to ask was, you're not working for a startup currently. Do you think you'll go back and in the future to do that? Because it sounds like you really loved it.
It's something that I did really enjoy. And I think I will go back into it at some point. I think for now, I'm just kind of enjoying riding the wave of consultancy and maybe moving from client to client and just gaining more experience. I think the more experience I get, the better the solutions I can provide. So right now, I think I'm happy just learning more and trying to absorb all the information I can from many different facets. I've been doing a lot of learning new programming languages over the last couple of months. So just trying to better myself. And then I think when I'm ready, maybe I'll open up my own company. Maybe I'll continue to be my own consultant, or maybe I'll join a startup. I don't know. It's very uncertain, and I like it that way. I like to not think about what my next step could be. I always kind of feel that your next step always presents itself to you. It's just your decision if you're ready to take that step or not. So that's where I'm at.
I like that. That's very zen. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, no problem.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Cool. Jethro Sloan, everyone.